I've got 3 questions already up my sleeve. If you have some questions that you feel like I'm not getting to, or they might get lost in the chat, why don't you just retype them again, and even do them in capitals? It honestly does not matter to me. And that way I will hopefully see them, and then we can either answer them or I can get someone else to answer them. I can see John's got a carton of Cooper's Pale Ale. Gil's Fishery was wondering where my whiskey is. Oh, Gil, we have to get to that. Okay, let's get to 3 questions to start with. Don't forget, start chucking your questions down if you have them. I've got a question here from Heron Aquatics 4661. And they ask, do you need a license to take fish from the wild? And can you take live rock, corals, and invertebrates? This is a really common question I get because I do like to do some collecting and I do put those videos up. In New South Wales, you do need a license, but it's not necessarily the license that you might be thinking. Let me explain about on that. So in New South Wales, there's a recreational fishing license, which is required when you want to go and fish with a rod and reel, as just a member of the public. That doesn't exist in Queensland, but in New South Wales, that's required. In that recreational fishing license, there's some guidelines, and in those guidelines is the equipment that you can use under that license, as well as if there's any size limits or bag limits for certain species of fish. So if you're catching a fish for your aquarium and you hold a recreational fishing license in New South Wales and you're using approved equipment, such as a rod and reel and a dip net with, I think it's a 16 millimeter mesh spacing, then you don't need an additional permit. Okay, you've got to stay out of your green zones. You have to abide by your bag and size limits, if there is one for that species. You won't need a collecting permit. And that was something that I sort of, in a way, displayed when I collected a mangrove jack, a little tiny mangrove jack down in my local harbour. So I do hold a variety of permits, but I didn't need those collecting permits. I just needed my recreational fishing license because I used a rod and a hook. The same can be done for things like snappers, moon wrasse, etc. This is a long question, isn't it? If you wish to go underwater with a face mask and snorkel or scuba, and if you wish to use nets and equipment that's not described within those regulations, and most obviously it's going to be hand nets with a fine mesh, that's when you need a Section 37 aquarium collection permit, which you can just Google and fill it out and apply for 1 year or 5 years, I think it is. You'll also still need your recreational fishing license. In Queensland, you don't need any of that, but you can't do it on compressed air. So you must do it by a snorkel. All right, so no scuba, no hooker. You can't take corals. You can take invertebrates that are mobile, like hermit crabs and shrimp, if you've listed those in the application for the Section 37 aquarium collection permit. I hope that answers that question. That's from Heron Aquatics 4661. We've got a question from Aaron Shiplock 5489, who would like to know my thoughts on marine ick and how do I treat it? How do I treat it? My thoughts on marine ick is that I think I have marine ick in my aquarium. It's either marine ick or velvet, and I was always going by the guidelines that marine ick, you can see the spots, you can count them, whereas marine velvet, it's a bit too much to count, therefore it's marine velvet. The reason I'm umming and ahhing is because marine velvet will generally kill fish very rapidly. So I'm leaning more towards marine ick. I've had it for a long, long time, and so I accept the fact that it's in my tank and I manage my husbandry accordingly. Excuse me. There's another question here from Heron Aquatics. in regards to how do I quarantine fish to prevent ick, velvet brook, and Uranema. So this kind of ties in with it. I don't quarantine my fish because I know I've already got marine ick. Now, of course, I don't have velvet or brook or Uranema, but I mostly collect my own fish. And that makes a massive difference because I'm a strong believer that it's the stress levels when they're heightened from the chain of custody and collection and shipping all across Australia or the world, and the malnutrition that can come with it, that is the thing that really causes the immune system of the fish to drop and the parasite infection to flare up. So obviously, coming from a collection perspective, which is half an hour away, I'm home, I'm either doing a freshwater dip for 3 minutes or I'm just drip acclimating and then straight into the tank. Stress levels are very low. I have had outbreaks of ick in my Palau tank, particularly when I had to drain the whole thing down because there was a leak in that island section. And that stress did make the ick flare up, particularly in my butterfly fish, which are really prone. So my response for that is I'm always running a big Pentair UV sterilizer. It's 120 watt, which is undersized for that volume of water. I make sure the globes are changed every year. I do frequent large water changes and I feed a lot, too much, because I honestly feel like malnutrition, particularly in fish like butterflies, is one of the major contributors to that drop in immune system and a flaring up of parasite diseases. Particularly also, you're going to have issues if you have aggression in the tank. So in those cases with the parasites, they flared up after I've had butterfly fish aggression, believe it or not. So I hope that answers. I think let's have a bit of a look along the chat. Then you will. Oh, we got tech problems on my end. What happened? Lost connection. Lost connection. Are we back, guys? Are we back? Just let me know in the chat if you can hear me or see me. He's back. Okay. I've got it was a 35 degrees Celsius day today that was rotten. And usually what it means in northern New South Wales is you get a storm coming across, and it's getting very bleak outside. So that may come and go, not sure. Anyhow, boat coat. Yeah, when I first started using it, I was not aware of a UV stable hardener. So if you're going to do an aquarium that is exposed to sunlight, you can cover over it, which is what I did with that rubber membranes type product, but just get the UV stable hardener. What else have we got here in the way of questions? I need a shave. Mate, come on. I've been up drinking all night. Collection question from Daystude. My question is this: what would be a good tank to set up for the introduction to saltwater aquariums? I've kept freshwater fish for 15 years, but never wanted to venture into salt. Cheers, Ricky. Ricky, I would say the best tank to set up would probably be, if you're asking about size, somewhere around about because some of the livestock, I believe connection's unstable again. Just hang in there if you can. Some of the livestock in marine aquariums tend to be on the larger side. So when you go for smaller tanks, you are limiting yourself. But if you're prepared for that and you do your research, you can go all the way down into something like a 100 litre or a 200 litre 2-foot style aquarium. And many of those aquariums are all in one. And that will make the process a little bit easier for you. The all-in-ones are pretty much similar to what the freshwater ones are, but you have a protein skimmer in there just to help with the filtration. But you're really going to have to research your fish choice, not so much coral choice, but I recommend starting with fish because you don't want to be sticking things like surgeonfish and tangs into a 200 litre aquarium. The other factor to think about is water changes. So, Ricky, if you don't have access to natural salt water, then you need to think about your capacity to mix up artificial seawater, potentially an RODI, freshwater source, salt, storage, and then the size and the expense of the water changes as well. So that all comes into it. And obviously a smaller tank, let's say a 100 litre tank, 10% water change each week, 10 litres, half a bucket, that's easy. All right, so what I would probably do is go having a squeeze at some of the fish that you think you like. Maybe jump onto Live Aquaria, their website, and type in nano fish, for example, and have a look around there first. Next question. How you going, Mad Dog? When am I coming to visit Queensland? I was there today. I was there today picking up a stars and striped pufferfish that came into Benny's Aquarium and Bundle on the Gold Coast that came in at a very large size and too big for Benny's tanks. And he put the call out to say, we need to have a big home for this guy. So I came up to grab that. Unfortunately, he's extremely malnourished, which makes me very sad and disappointed for the Australian wholesaler that sent that fish. But you shall see that in a video. And other than that, I believe Gallery Aquatica, Anya and Cam are going to be opening their new store, which I think is at Tingalpa. So they've closed down their Wynnum store and opening their grand store in February. So I certainly plan to be up in Queensland for that. Fish collecting, many fish for snorkel. Okay, JG Oz. Hey, mate, just wanting to say a huge thanks for all the effort you put into your channel. No worries, mate. It's a rarity having such an interesting, engaging resource that's actually Australian. Well, thank you very much. That's a really nice comment. And I guess my response to that is I'm really just trying to put out my hobby and share my adventures and see if you guys enjoy it, and you seem to be. So, yeah, we'll keep on doing it. Fish collecting, when you know where they come from, like as a collector, caught from the wild. There's obviously a bit of chat going on there. Andrew Shiplock, who had the question, Bringo. Okay, he's got a Cade 1500, 600 litres. He was running 2 Aquarist 57-watt UV sterilizers and a Pentair 40-watt. Fed heavily frozen foods and a DIY seafood mix. Minimal aggression in the tank, just always ending up losing to ick. Okay. The first thing I would do is to ask you if you can respond in the chat, maybe how fast you found the death rate. Like, was it within a day of spotting the spots? Because if it was that fast, then potentially it was velvet. The other question I've got for you is, can you count the spots? Are the spots, if the spots are countable, yeah, it's probably ick. And if it's not countable, then it's probably velvet. Velvet's going to be a lot harder on your fish. In regards to your UV sterilizers, I would say to you 2 things. How old are the bulbs? How clean are the quartz sleeves? And how slow is the flow going past those bulbs? You have to dial the flow in according to parasite control. Fresh by Design, which is a website. It's an aquaculture supply company down in Southern Highlands. Well, they sell the Pentair units, and on their page for UV sterilizers, they have a graph, a chart for all the different Pentair models. And in that chart, there's the flow rate for parasite control and the flow rate for algae control. You're going to find that the flow rate for parasite control is ridiculously slow compared to algae control. The reason being, it's a larger organism. It needs more contact time or exposure time to be sterilized by the bulb. If you're running water too fast past it, the parasites just aren't going to get sterilized, and therefore you're not going to knock those numbers down. So check that out. He's back. Okay. Fish collecting. Yep. We're back. We've got a question from Elias Torties Ilas Ringmar. Man, you guys got some interesting looking YouTube names. 7126. What species of reptiles have you kept? I think you mentioned monitors. And also, what's the snake in the background of your video? You mean the snake that's desperately waiting for its new home? Back in the day, I desperately wanted a diamond python, and I was told no. And so what I did instead, this is when I was a teenager, was I converted my outdoor above ground swimming pool. I cut all the liner out of it and I made it into an above ground pit. And in that pit, well, I divided it in 2. And in that pit, I kept whole assortment of different types of dragons, water dragons, bearded dragons, Jackie dragons, mountain dragons, blue tongues, blotchies, turtles, agurnias, Cunninghams, turtles inside. And then I got into monitors, and that's where I particularly focused my attention after a while. I was really keen to focus on the large monitors, the large goannas, and I got to keeping all of them in Australia. So the Spencers, Lacey's, Sandys, Gouldies, Mertens, Panoptes, all of them with the exception of the Parenti, which just wasn't really available, and the Mangrove monitor. And I kept Ackies and Gildens and whatnot as well. In the end, when I got married and had kids, I donated most of my monitors to other hobbyists or to the Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary. Vroomi's made a comment here that natural seawater's been a game changer. And Matt gets his delivered in an IBC. Mixing salt cost him a fortune. Mate, if I had to mix up my own salt water, I wouldn't keep a marine fish tank. I just wouldn't do it. Or I would keep an absolutely tiny one, like a little nano or something. The trouble is I enjoy seeing fish. I enjoy watching fish, and I enjoy seeing fish move naturally obviously from being snorkeling. And so I want to build big tanks. But if I wasn't near the coast, I wouldn't do it. So I agree with you completely. But the natural seawater, it's different. It is different. There's just the corals that you have respond better. I'm imagining there's going to be some plankton, some phytoplankton, and I'm not concerned at all by any potential pathogens or pests that come with that. Oh, one of the other reasons why I don't quarantine, by the way, is because I collect my own natural seawater. I collect my own sand. I collect detritus from underneath rocks and things to seed the bacterial levels in the aquarium. I'll collect chunks of tube worm housings to put into my sump and my filtration system. So I'm a big believer that if you are going to quarantine fish, and by quarantine I don't mean necessarily treat with copper, but if you're going to quarantine an observation quarantine, you need to quarantine everything. Otherwise, it's kind of like leaving the front door locked but the back door open and hoping that a burglar's not going to get in the house. You know what I mean? Oats 517, are you able to do some similar content to Jason? Catch and release of natives and underwater footage. I believe Oates is probably talking about Jason Sorter, which is Australian Biotopes YouTube channel. And Jason does a fantastic job at that, at exploring different biotopes and locations around Australia. So I'm really going to leave him to do that. I have done some freshwater collection videos. I did some rainbow fish ones a long time ago. Quality wasn't that great. And also last springtime, I went up and caught some sooty grunters with Lawson up on the Mary River in Queensland. Brought those guys back. So there is a video up there. You can see that. And yes, I will do some more freshwater collection, but I'm only going to collect when I want that fish from my aquarium. I'm not collecting just for the sake of it. I don't believe in creating harm for a fish. For example, I might collect some Australian freshwater herring, but they can suffer a fair bit from a hook, even with a pushed barb. And unless I'm going to bring those back to my aquarium, I don't feel justified in doing that and then just releasing them. Sunshine Coast Skin Divers, what net can you collect fish with in New South Wales? Okay, so there is one very important factor with New South Wales if you're going to go collecting, be it freshwater or saltwater, and that is that you cannot use monofilament netting. You can't use cast nets. You can't use monofilament netting. It's illegal. Commercial fishermen can't use monofilament netting. Queensland, you can. Go across into New South Wales, the Tweed River, you'll get stung if there's a fisheries guy there. So that makes it really hard for classic collecting, such as using a invisible monofilament barrier net or a mist net, which is pretty much the way commercial guys will catch things like surgeonfish, butterflies, etc. So you need to get a little bit creative when it comes to nets. My nets, you may have seen my green kind of open dip nets, I guess you call them. I just purchased over the counter from Fishing Tackle Australia, or Mo Tackle. Wooden handle, they're just round. Obviously, small fish such as cleaner wrasse and juvenile butterflies and things can go straight through them. So you might need to start thinking about making some nets, and that's where you might have to go and visit the old Spotlight store and have a look at things like bridal veil, mosquito netting, and also Bunnings, and go and check out their insect netting or their pest netting, which is the kind of netting I use, that white nylon netting I've used over to make a drake net. You might have seen that in some of the videos where I dive down. It's got sinkers around the outside, floats in the middle. I put it over the rock so it contains the fish so I can get back up and have a breath. That's insect netting from Bunnings. It does suck not being able to use monofilament. John, how you going, John? I collect a lot of Central Australian fish up here in Alice Springs. I was making a comment there to Steve. Okay, Andrew Shiplock. Okay, says we're back to Andrew with his what's ick. Definitely not velvet. Sometimes took weeks to lose the fish. I think the UV was definitely slowing it down, but not enough to combat it. Quartz sleeves are clean and flow very slow at 400 to 500 litres per hour. I think you'll find that that is too fast. If someone wants to do some calculations for me, I think the flow rate for my 120 watt UV was something like 15 litres a minute. Someone can do that calculation for me. It's slow, and that's 120 watt. So if someone can have a look at that, but definitely jump onto that website, Fresh by Design, and find that page, because honestly, the UV, I wouldn't run a fish tank without it. It's an absolute game changer for me. So just check that. All bulbs less than a year. I had a lot of fish that are known to be sensitive to ick. So what sort of fish species are you losing? Because that's one of the other things. If you want to try and manage ick, but you're desperate to try and keep things like blue tangs and powder blue tangs, then that might be a losing battle. Certain fish with a higher slime coat, like certain wrasse, not all wrasse, certain wrasse, I found that some of the dwarf angels, certainly things like eels, damselfish, are a lot more robust. And it's obviously the slime coat is just able to help protect the fish from the penetrating parasites. Gingerman J, South Africa 8915 asks, have you found your interest in the hobby has changed from when you started to now, as from just trying to keep a reef alive in a tank to now all the DIY project and figuring things out like the sea? Mate, no, my hobby's not changed at all. What you're seeing on YouTube is my hobby, and it's the way I've always been. I'm primarily interested in fish, and okay, all right, okay, I might be wrong slightly. All right, hear me out. So I didn't always build big aquariums. I had a 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot that was Tanganyika, and then it was a reef tank in North Queensland back when Cairns Marine used to be open to the public. And then it came down, and then it was an Amazon blackwater style aquarium. Then it was a planted aquarium. Then it was rainbow fish, and then it was a subtropical reef. And then now it's part of my Saratoga aquarium, just the glass panes. But it wasn't really until I got into Coffs Harbour I started to my own aquarium fish. But primarily I was out there seeing the fish underwater that I realized, I love seeing fish and a lot of fish, but I love seeing fish move naturally. And like my wedge tail triggerfish, who's about 4 or 5 inches long, he can make it along the entire length of my 3.6 meter long aquarium in seconds. And I realized that you're not going to see fish behaving truly naturally unless you've got a big aquarium, and i.e. there's plenty of room for them to swim around. So that has changed by nature of me going collecting and snorkeling. But in terms of the DIY, I've always done that. I haven't got a massive income. I wish I did have a massive income with disposable money, you might say. And so I've always built things like filters, sulfur reactors to combat nitrate. I've done protein skimmers in the past. And I just try and save a bit of money as I go along. So look, I must admit, the little bit of money, the few hundreds of dollars that comes through from YouTube every month is a little bit that I can put towards, might be a new wave maker or a new LED light or something like that. But other than building big aquariums, my hobby has pretty much stayed the same, and it's mostly about getting out there. Righto, what have we got? Blake Thomas. Yep, Monsoon have natural seawater plumbed into their sheds. I don't believe they're on complete recirculation all the time. And I was just at an aquaculture facility that with Tom Bowling, who started Biota, and he's setting up an aquaculture facility in northern New South Wales. And I had a bit of a look through that, and they also have access to flow through seawater from Kingscliff, which is pretty exciting. They're the guys that Tom's the guy that had recently had some fusiliers and those little slipper lobsters that went to Gallery Aquatica, just as a bit of a teaser. But he's working on a lot of things there, though. He's a great breeder. Tom was who I got pissed with last night. Natural seawater has all the natural things, not like trace elements, and doesn't need to mix into man-made salt. Yeah, it does, but of course, trace elements get used up. Obviously, depending upon your coral load and your fish load, trace elements are going to get used up at varying rates. So eventually, you're going to need to do some form of dosing, unless, of course, you're doing water changes on the daily. And I do know people that do that. Aaron Armstrong, how are you, mate? He's struggling to get the lighting to correct to grow macroalgae. Any ideas? Tell you what, mate. I'm struggling too with macroalgae at the moment. Let me explain, and that might help to answer your question as well. You may recall I got a peninsula tank over in my shed, and it's about a 1.5 by 90 centimeters wide and 2 foot high. And I've set it up. Originally, you saw a video where I was trying to do like some DIY, like a Tunzi swell box kind of thing. I called it a surge box, and then I was doing the Carlson surge device, and that's the last that you've seen of that. My intent with that was to go from there to one of those before and after style videos. So it's all aquascaped, and I'm trying to grow, and I'm using 2 of those. They are the slim ones, but I got 2 with the reflectors on, and I've got a Chihiros, just plain white one down the middle. So it's a very white toned aquarium. There is some red, there's some green, and I've also toned the blue up, but it's definitely a freshwater aesthetic, and that was the intent. But I'm having issues with that kind of brown, I'm not going to call it turf algae, but just sort of brown fluffy algae kind of growing on the caulerpa itself. I think early on my nutrient dosing was way too high, so I backed that right off, and I'm just dosing iron. I'm going to start dosing iodine as well, and I'm going to see if that has an effect, because I'm trying to grow it as a carpet, and I'm not sure if I've got too much light, hence the turfy kind of algae, or not enough light, because I've seen that exact caulerpa growing as a bit of a weed as an accidental introduction to people's reef tanks, and they're trying to get rid of it. Here I am trying to grow it. So I guess my suggestion about lighting would be, most macroalgae are going to grow in shallow water. I certainly see a fair variety when I'm snorkeling. Shallow water is going to have more red and green spectrum in it. So therefore, I feel like full spectrum's the go. It's also going to have a very high PAR compared to deeper water reefs, etc. So I would My approach is to say that I need a full spectrum with more path probably than what you would for the average modern day reef tank. But likewise, my approach is to fertilize accordingly. So, and I'm learning here. So I'm interested to know if you've got experiences and what you're finding with your lighting. Dingo Dave's glad to meet me today at Benny's Aquarium. Dingo Dave, how are you, mate? Good to see you. Andrew Shiplock, where do I buy tickets for an in-person shed tour? I've had plenty of people that have come by to visit. And what I would say to you is that if you're passing by Coffs Harbour, hit me up because I'm always going to say yes. I don't have my phone number up there on the YouTube channel details, but my email address is. So just jump on that email address and hit me up, or hit me up on the messages, Facebook messages, and I'll send you my phone number and we can have a chat. Absolutely. First for him, has a huge green torch coral in the tank. Had all these little green polyps pop up all over the rock work. So it's budding, 15 to 20. I thought, on God, here we go, Manjano anemones, but no. Yeah, they're budded. 606, do I make my own saltwater? Absolutely not. As I mentioned before, I collect straight from the Nambucca River these days on a high tide, an incoming high tide. I used to collect from Coffs Harbour, but I was a little bit worried about pollution from fishing boats. And the boat ramp in the Nambucca River is very close to the river mouth. It's pretty much where I do a lot of my collecting on the videos. And as long as there hasn't been excessive rain and it's not low tide, then the salinity is fine. And there is zero phosphate. Okay, Ginger Minja, South Africa, 8915 has asked, what's on your list of fish that I wish to collect this season? Very easy for me to answer that question because I love butterfly fish. And I'm experimenting a bit with different species of butterfly fish in with my corals in Palau Reef. So on my list of butterflies to collect this season are the Mertens butterfly, which is Chelylon mertensii. Generally see one or two of those each season. I saw one last weekend when I caught the little keyhole angel. I also want to catch a dot and dash butterfly, Chelylon peloensis, I believe it is. I tend to see one or two of those each season. I would like to catch some bannerfish, and I'm not going to lie, I've thought about putting a copper band butterfly and or a Moorish idol in my macroalgae peninsula tank because I feel like for a fish like that, if it's in the presence of macroalgae, no coral, and only sort of peaceful schooling fish, like I was really planning to have a nice decent group of cardinal fish, some of the orange line cardinals and the ringtail cardinals, that there's no aggression and there's no competition for things like, you know, mussels and sponge that I can put in there for the butterfly or the Moorish idol to graze on. So there's some ideas, but yeah, absolutely targeting butterflies. And I've got my mate down there who's still learning to collect fish, and he's got 3 aquariums. And so if he's after something, I'll help him out a little bit if I can have a crack. He wants me to catch a coral beauty for him. There's one down there at the moment. I've already got 2 coral beauties that have paired up, and so I'll try and catch that for him. Fish collecting. Yes, he wants a conspic angel. If I caught a conspic angel, interesting question, would I keep it? So that's not really one that's on my list. And you think, oh yeah, it's really, really valuable fish. Would I keep it? I'm not, technically speaking, allowed to sell. Well, I'm not allowed to sell fish that are on my collection permit, but I can gift fish. I'd be tempted to keep it in my peninsula tank, my macroalgae display. There's my loving wife. Sunshine Coast, skin divers. What was your favorite fish that you've collected and the fish that made you work for it? Well, the fish that made me work for it was the keelhole angelfish from last video, last weekend. That was exhausting. The water wasn't very clear, and sometimes I have a bit of whiskey the night before, and it was up and down and up and down, and there was just gas and seaweed everywhere, and that one really took it out of me. I was quite dizzy after that. Planning on trying to get myself one of those rebreathers. Well, not rebreathers, those floating compressors. There's one in Australia called an Air Buddy. There are some overseas ones, but there's an American version, a cheaper Asian one without all the safety on it. But that'll be a game changer, because that way I won't have to worry about going up and up and down. I've just got my hose coming down to me from a floating compressor, completely safe, alarms, all that sort of thing. And I can stay underwater with my mouthpiece for about 45 minutes to an hour, which would be a game changer. My favorite fish to collect. Funnily enough, I'm going to answer that by saying well, there's two ways of saying it. Which is my favorite fish that I have collected, and which was my favorite collecting experience. So my favorite fish that I have collected, he's no longer with me. I had him for many, many years, and that was a Stars and Stripes puffer fish that I called Teddy. And Teddy was a little behemoth, and he was an amazing fish. And I caught him on a fishing rod and hook by mistake. Had no intention or targeting that fish. And I thought, I'll bring him home. This was years and years ago. And I had him for years and years and years. And he grew from a little guy into a big guy. And such an amazing pet. Such an amazing pet. And that's why I was quite okay with going up and picking up that Stars and Stripes puffer from Benny's Aquarium this afternoon, even though I was fully intending on collecting my own Stars and Stripes in the Gold Coast Seaway, make a bit of a video out of it. But, you know, a big fish in tiny tanks, not tiny tanks, a big fish in tanks that aren't suitable from a wholesaler that shouldn't have done it. And, you know, what do? You drive up there. My favorite collecting experience is moray eels. Because there's a bit of a story here, if you've got time. How much time we got? 43 minutes. Green moray eels are a common subtropical species around the southern part of Australia, and they go up as far as about southeast Queensland. Gymnothorax prasinus. Amazingly too, they fluoresce under blue actinic lighting. They fluoresce bright yellow, the same color as that, you know, when you pour the amino acid from Red Sea into the tank and it goes all that fluorescent yellow, exactly the same color as that. Absolutely amazing. But the reason was a memorable collecting experience is because I found them. They're very common, but I found a spot where they were popping up underneath or from the Conjervoy over these big rock areas in the harbour at Coffs Harbour. And I thought to myself, I had nothing. I was just going for a snorkel. I thought, oh, wow, look at those. I'm going to try and collect them. I'm going to try and make a trap. So the trap was a bucket with a lid and a hole in the end, a rope to a float. In the base of that bucket, I just put one of my leads off my weight belt, just a small one in there, and I packed it full of fish heads and guts and stuff that I'd taken from the co-op, and just put a bit of a false bottom mesh in there. And the idea was I could snorkel out to the spot and go on down, lay the bucket in a sensible spot, you know, go back up to the surface, watch from the surface. I've got the rope right there. I can see when the eel goes into the bucket, and I can just pull the bucket up. Brilliant. What can go wrong? So I made my bucket. I got my fish heads. They just so happened in the afternoon, and it was a bit messy. There was a bit of swell going, just a bit. I thought, oh, I've come this far. You know, I've got to go and do this. So I swam on out with the bucket and the bonito heads. I went on down the spot. There were the eels with their faces coming out through the Conjervoy. I thought, perfect. Got it down, wedged it down. It stayed down. I floated back up to the surface and I looked down and there was a dirty big bull shark down there. And that's the first and only time I've found or spotted a bull shark whilst I've been out collecting. And everything looks big underwater, yeah? So, you know, it's hard to say, oh, it was 3 meters long. All I know is it had a big fat gut on it. And generally when bull sharks have got a big fat gut, they're a fair-sized bull shark. Anyway, so there I am going, crap, what am I going to do? And I thought, okay, abandon the trap. It's obviously smelt the fish. Yeah, it's messy, it's murky, it's the afternoon. It's stupid me. And I start sort of trying to keep an eye on the fish, stay at the surface, and just sort of go backwards with the fins. And the bull shark comes up and just starts coming towards and investigating me. And I thought, fuck. So right at that time, very conveniently, a bigger bit of wave came on. I freaked out because I couldn't see what was going on. The shark was there, but it picked me up and dumped me back on a rocky kind of a ledge that I could then swim across the little shallow section to the main part of Muttonbird Island. And I left. But I did get the moray eel. I went back the next night at midnight fishing on the edge of Muttonbird Island with a fishing hook, squashed the barb. And the idea was I'll cast out into the gloom. And the main thing I learned is that you can't put drag on the line, because if you do that, it's going to catch into the conjavoy. So as soon as you feel that grab and that pull, you've got an eel. And then comes the mental battle of standing there for an hour in the dark at midnight, wondering if there's even a fish on the end of it, or if you just stuck in the rock or on conjavoy. Meanwhile, there's the eye shine of this shark swimming in the same spot backwards and forwards. I'm going, oh my God, he's still there. And let the line go a little bit slack. You feel a little bit of a tug and then pull. And then I caught my moray eel for the tank. So that was my most memorable collecting experience. And what have we got here? Vrumi asks, how are you going with your phosphate and nitrates? I'm battling still. I'll start with nitrate. My nitrate levels in both tanks sit around about 50 ppm, which is just because I feed well, and I strongly believe that most people that are focused on coral reefs, and amazing coral reefs, if you look at their fish, they've got that sunken forehead area and a bit of a spine showing, especially in surgeonfish, and I hate that. And that's one of the things that's going to contribute to a lower immune system and hence parasite disease outbreaks. So I feed well. I've got butterflies that need to pick at food all the time. They just don't seem to store fat. And I've got a dirty big moray eel on the tank that I want to keep fed. So I've hooked up a sulfur reactor, just a DIY version, and I'm allowing that to season. And the idea is that you have a very slow flow going through, just a drip, drip, drip. So the water flow through it becomes anoxic, which allows the bacteria in that environment to use the sulfur as a food source, and in the lack of oxygen, and feed off the nitrate and release it as nitrogen gas. Works very well, but you have to season it and then gradually increase the drip rate until you might get a stream, testing the outflow of the output until you continue to read zero nitrate coming out. If you get a reading on it, it means potentially that not all the nitrate's been processed. You might have the flow too fast and you can bomb it by having oxygen in there. So that's a really effective way of doing it. It does consume alkalinity in the tank, quite a fair bit. So you have to monitor your alkalinity levels. And the phosphate, I am just waiting to get a phosphate filter to put on one of those big canisters to put onto my freshwater source coming from the bore that'll go up into my gravity feed system, and that'll help to remove the phosphate, the silicate, and also potentially any heavy metal contamination. So hopefully that'll sort it out. I'm also started to dose lanthanum chloride into the skimmer every hour, just a small amount to be skimmed out on Palau Reef, just to try and keep those phosphates down. Oh, freshwater question. Love it. Good on you, Gil. How is the Saratoga going? Has the fancy mesh fence kept it in? Absolutely. I don't find they're not, well, okay, they are jumpers, clearly, but they're only jumpers after being stressed, I'm finding. And the only time I found it jump, or a Saratoga jump, was when, with the original one, I tried to net it, and hence I stressed it. When I put the Saratoga into the tank, I was so worried about even doing some pruning of the plants or gravel vacuuming or whatever. I thought, oh, I can't have any of these screens open. What if it's going to... Well, it doesn't. It doesn't, because you're not stressing it. It's a bit of a fussy eater in a way. Loves its bugs, and I've got a cockroach colony going, but I've used all the large ones. There's stacks and stacks of baby cockroaches, just the woodies, which I need to grow up. I need to get another batch of some mature ones introduced. I've been collecting grasshoppers from the farm. That happens every summertime. So bugs are its favorite. You'll occasionally eat a prawn. It won't touch pellets. It won't touch floating pellets, which is a real bugger. And every now and then, I must admit, it does like to have a small chicken neck, because I feed chicken necks to my dogs sometimes. So I get a small one, I'll chuck that, and it absolutely grabs onto that. But I don't want to go too much with that, because it's not really a natural food source. And I do pull that bit of skin with the fat off, just to try and reduce that kind of an impact. When I came back from Tassie, Gil, I was missing a few rainbow fish, because Sam the Saratoga wasn't fed whilst I was away. My daughter was great. She fed all the fish, but I felt like feeding bugs for her might be a bit too much to ask. So I kind of thought, oh, fingers crossed, but there were some rainbow fish missing when I got home. And that was always going to happen, and hence the reason why I'm using the rainbows that I bred myself, my local ones. Since I've been home, it's back onto eating. I'm feeding him or her. No rainbows missing. So obviously that's just the key. Keep the food. And I think what I'll start to do is look at experimenting with a few different types of rainbows. Maybe I was going to go for some of the Goida rivers, the trifasciatas. I felt like the original biotope idea was a bit limited, because the splendidas up there around the Dawson River, they're not all that exciting to look at. And then I thought, geez, if I'm not even going to do the biotope side of things, and I'm doing it's a bit more open, hence I've also got sooty grunters in there. Geez, I could also even go things like some of the Glossolepsis guinamensis, or maybe even things like the lacustris, the turquoise rainbow, because I think a big group of those would be amazing. And the sooty grunters, believe it or not, even though they're a charcoal fish, there's these undertones of color, especially under the eye. There's a real kind of minty green stripe under the eye, which I think those Glossolepsis and even the turquoise, when they get that kind of steely color, that sort of blue through to steely gray, I feel like that could complement really, really well. And they also grow a little bit bigger. So that's the plans for that tank. I also love to get some snakehead gudgeons too. Archerfish are on the list. I've got 3 archerfish in my Palau Reef, and I'm thinking about taking them out. I put them in there because for something a little bit different, and they've been perfectly fine, but they're so linked to the surface that I find that I don't really see them. And they also want to go down the far end near the overflow pretty much all the time, because there's just too much commotion at the other end with all the cast and surge device and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know, I might put them into my freshwater tank, like convert them back to freshwater again, or I might move them on to another keeper. I'm not sure. Archerfish are awesome fish to keep, as are the Gulf Saratoga, if you have a big enough tank. Yeah, and archerfish get really big too. It's quite surprising how big they get. A lot bigger than what people think, like a foot long. Joseph Nass. Hey Joseph. John Moore, the archerfish are going to a 4x2x2. John, you'll need to have a bigger tank than that. And the Saratoga into a 6x2x2. John, you'll need to have a bigger tank than that. Eventually, not necessarily straight away, but eventually. I'd say for those archerfish, you're really looking at probably a minimum of a 6x2x2 for a small group, maybe 3, more than likely an 8x2x2. And the toga, I wouldn't want, having seen my toga, I honestly wouldn't want to put it in anything less than a 12-foot tank. I just feel like you just can't get the speed and the momentum up. My wife loved Teddy as well. Joseph Nass, long-time viewer, do you know any spots in New South Wales that have coral at snorkeling depth? Well, yes, I do, Joseph. I have shown, if you have a look at one of my videos where I'm kayaking to a island or something like that, it's a little island up in Wagooga, Whoopi Reef, and it's got coral growing there. There is coral growing spotted along the coast in parts around Coffs Harbour, particularly things like turbinarias, which are like the cup coral, Polypora damicornis. You'll find some Aquapora robusta. You'll find sarcophyton, and you'll find the brown gladiella, which is that cookies and cream kind of thing, as well as stacks of zoanthids. You'll find Micromusa lordhowensis, rock pools, that kind of thing. But to find the better coral cover in New South Wales, you're talking about some of these, because, you know, they're isolated over, you know, decades. So the Saltwater Islands, for example, you can't collect there. Well, you can't collect coral anyway. Saltwater Islands, Fish Rock, Cook Island up near the Tweed, Julian Rocks up at Byron. Hence, there's a theme there. You can see they're all protected areas. But if you spend enough time and you find some protected areas, Mini Water is a great place for looking at coral. I've done some videos there. Then you will find the coral in those protected alcoves and the western side or the northwestern side of headlands and islands and things, because it's away from the swell. The biggest problem with coral is not only people messing with it, but the swell. So if you've got swell picking up from the south, that is picking up the sand and turning it around, and just makes an absolute trash, and that affects the coral. Barra in the Nerang River. Well, we know why there's barra in the Nerang River, don't we? The Gold Coast Seaway, I haven't spent, you know, a great deal of time there. I know Steve from Fish Collecting. If you want to see some plenty of video, here's a little plug for you, Steve. If you want to see some fish collecting from Steve on scuba, check out his YouTube channel, Fish Collecting. He does a fair bit in the Tweed River where he can use scuba. But he also does just some snorkeling exploration videos kind of thing in the Nerang. The Nerang and the Gold Coast Seaway is funny because it's such a melting pot of people wanting to use it for different purposes. Obviously, there's a big scuba diving and snorkeling kind of contingency there that, you know, people want to see but not touch, so to speak. There's obviously lots of fishermen there, which, you know, create all sorts of issues when you see the hooks and the lines being caught all over the rocks. And then you got commercial collectors there. And then you've got recreational collectors, such as myself. And of course, there's going to be some clash, I guess you might say. I don't like the fact that the jet ski cowboys make a great mess and come too close and risk the safety of divers and snorkelers. I don't like the fish that the reason that I'm finding fishing line and hooks everywhere. And in fact, last time I found a bream that had been hooked and the lead was caught in a rock, and the fish just could not go anywhere. So I went down and got him out. And of course, the divers don't like the fact that I might take a butterfly fish from the seaway because I'm taking pretty things that they want to see. So it's an interesting spot. Let's just put it that way. What have we got here? Gills Fisheroon. The bull shark would not have been able to see me in the big cloud of brown water. Luckily, it's the only time. Funny enough, that was probably before COVID. Jesus, it goes fast, doesn't it? I haven't been back to that same spot, which is just kind of stupid. I've been around the corner, but I don't know, superstitious. I'll go back there this season. David Smith, talking about building a canopy for the archerfish so they can have plants. Yeah, a bit of a paludarium style. They can also jump. The one thing to keep in mind with them is if they're spitting, they might spit water into your lights. So you might want to have a think about the IP rating of your light. The IP rating, like IP67, for example, the first number I believe is your dust proof number, and the second number is your water resistance number. So I think an IP68 is a light that you can put submerged underwater for like half an hour at a certain depth. I think an IP67 is splash rated. So just check into that, because if you, particularly with some of the overseas lights, they might not necessarily be an IP67 if the archer fish are spinning. That could be an issue. Stephen Campy. Mad dog, mate. Mad dog. How big would you go with a reef tank? I wouldn't go any bigger than the tank I've got at the moment, and I'm not even calling that a reef tank yet, because it's I guess more an experimental reef tank with corals that are battling phosphate but also battling butterfly fish. It's 12 foot long, it's 4 foot from front to back, and it's effectively 1 meter or 3 foot and a bit high. I 100% wouldn't go any higher than that, because I already need grabbing tools to reach the bottom if a coral gets knocked off, or, I mean, mounting corals is a nightmare. And them falling off all the time. And you can go through, Grub. That's right. Picking up things. No, don't close the mate, because it get too hot. Yeah. Picking up, sorry, that's my son. Picking up corals that have fallen, mussel shells, all that sort of stuff. So height-wise, I like to keep my tanks at an armpit height so I can reach over the top. 12 foot is a fantastic length, especially for seeing the fish act naturally. I've got a pair of two-tone wrasse that spawn basically every evening, and they need a lot of room to spawn. They get a lot of speed up, and then they come together and they go vertically, and then they start to do their shimmy and then release their sperm and their eggs, and then they go back down again, and then they repeat the process. You just can't see that in a smaller tank. However, I wouldn't go any wider, deeper, front to back than 4 foot, unless it was a peninsula and you could walk all the way around it for maintenance. And for me, a tank of 4,000 litres, 1,000 gallons means I can do one IBC, which is 1,000 litres, and that gives me a 25% water change of that volume if you don't include the sump. So I feel like from that perspective, it makes good sense. So I wouldn't go higher, I wouldn't go deeper front to back, and 12 foot, it's already pretty bloody big. Ravencore. Raven, you are from the UK. Morning all, how are you, mate? David Smith says, chicken necks are good food and bait in his opinion. It's funny, I do find a lot of fish like to eat chicken on the hook, and you're absolutely correct there. It also stays on. And it's really odd that the Saratoga, as soon as it sees me do a little dangle with the chicken neck in the afternoon, I just did it tonight, just a little one, peel the fat off. So it's just the bone and the flesh, really. And just chuck it, bang, strikes straight away. Prawn, it's really weird. Obviously, they like the taste. Fish Collecting 9149. Adam, would you eat mollies, guppies, and swordtails that you can catch? I'm assuming what Fish Collecting is asking. Steve is saying, would I feed mollies, guppies, and swordtails that I can catch in creeks? Eat? Would I feed or would I keep, Steve? You guys got sound. Let me know if you got sound still. It's just started to rain down here, but I haven't had any alerts, okay? Would I feed them? Absolutely, I would feed them. You could do, well, if it's a freshwater fish and you're using it as a saltwater live food, then obviously not a problem with disease. Vice versa, if you're using a marine fish like a whitebait or a potty mullet as a live food, then you could do a freshwater dip. I do have a very strong opinion about the feeding of live food. Got sound, excellent, Gil, thank you. A very strong opinion about feeding live food. It's fantastic nutrition for the fish. The live fish or the shrimp or the mussels or whatever it might be have gut contents that are active. So the nutrition that comes from what they've been feeding on also goes to the fish that you're feeding. those gut contents have enzymes in them, which get passed on to the predatory fish. It's just a win-win. What I don't like is that kind of side of fish keeping where you see guys get glee out of, I shouldn't say guys or girls, get glee out of feeding big feeder fish like big potty mullet or, dare I say, mice to their Oscars and their Saratogas and their predatory fish because they want to sort of, I don't know, it's just kind of sick. I don't like that. And also the predatory fish has to really work. It tears the fish apart. It's just kind of gross. I don't like it. The other thing keep in mind if you're going to use live food is that freshwater fish in the Cyprinidae family, cyprinids, so that's goldfish, barbs, minnows. Anyway, barbs and goldfish can result in a vitamin, is it A deficiency? Because they have thiaminase. Is that vitamin A or vitamin B? Might be vitamin B. They have excess thiaminase, which can cause a vitamin deficiency in your predatory fish. So it's really not great to be feeding live goldfish. On your rooming, catch you later, Matt. No worries, mate. David Smith, can you get anglerfish in the aquarium trade or catch them anywhere? I saw some that got in the Nambucca River not that long ago. I'm not into marine fish keeping, but I had one of them for a few months till something went wrong. Yes, you absolutely can get anglerfish in the aquarium trade. You can get them ordered in. There's often some real interesting color varieties that come from the reefs because they mimic things like sponges and even those basket sea stars. So you get some interesting patterns. You get nice yellows. You can even get pinks and things. You also get, so you get anglerfish, but you also get things like handfish. They're all in that sort of Scorpionidae family. I think, it's the lionfish family. There is also a handfish / angler style fish that I saw in the Nambucca River, and it's that kind of black one. I think it's called the painted. I'll have to look that up, but it's not as bright, but it's black with those kind of lines and stripes across its body. And, they've got that kind of character. But for me, I don't think I'd keep one because I tend to like my fish to be moving, a bit more action. Neil /K9G, any DIY suggestions on how to counter TGP supersaturated gas within the aquarium, especially to avoid gas bubble disease in seahorses? Do you use an aragonite reactor as well? Okay, to answer the aragonite reactor, so aragonite is basic calcium carbonate. I include aragonite, which was the Carib Sea product, which is for calcium reactors. I've included that in my sulfur reactor because the act of creating or fostering sulfur utilizing anaerobic bacteria in a column can be acidifying. If you think about it, if you do it wrong, you can get sulfuric acid, but you do tend to get a little bit of an acidification of the water that comes out of the sulfur reactor. So I have included a cap, a decent sized cap of that Carib Sea aragonite, that calcium reactor media on the top of the sulfur in the column. So as the water passes through there, the acid can potentially dissolve some of that calcium carbonate and it can help to buffer before it comes back into the sump. Do I have suggestions to counteract supersaturated gas? To be honest with you, I'm trying to promote it, and I'm doing it indirectly by using a Carlson surge device on my Palau tank. So the Carlson surge device, when it discharges, there's a lot of bubbles that go into that tank. And it's one of the reasons why people don't like or didn't like using them, and it kind of fell out of favor. But I find that really natural. And I haven't found any problems with it. In fact, if anything, I think I find that it's great for coral. It helps them slime. And I like to think it's good for certain fish like the the clown tang that I have that likes to live in a high energy environment. You might say the same thing about other surgeonfish such as Achilles. But seahorses, I don't know. But I would say, why have you got supersaturated gas inside? Well, why is your water supersaturated? Do you have a protein skimmer which is hang on the back going directly into your display, for example, if it's a small display? If that's the case, you might be able to put a sponge or something on the output of it to try and help baffle some of the bubbles. If that's not the case, then I would say maybe you might need to look at your sump and have a look at the baffle arrangement in that to make sure that there's adequate dispersion of the bubbles as it passes through the sump. And if that's not the case, have a look at your return pump. If it's plumbed in line, make sure there's no tiny leaks. Turn it off. Make sure no water comes out of the suction side, because if there's a small leak on the suction side, you won't see it when it's active, but it will suck air at the same time as sucking water, and that can create a fine mist of bubbles and hence supersaturate the aquarium. It will not until you turn it off that it will start leaking water, but that's only if it's hard plumbed. So I might need a bit more information from that. Have you guys lost sound? I don't think you've lost sound now. Try and get through a few more questions. We're sitting at 1 hour and 12 minutes. So fish collecting. Would I feed those to the Saratoga? No. I have no intention of feeding live fish to the toga, because I want to keep the toga in a community environment that includes small fish. That's the whole idea, such as the rainbow fish. So I certainly don't want to feed live fish and get him all excited about that. The same goes true for my mangrove jack. Oh, here we go. Mangrove jack. Fried sooty grunts will take feeder fish. They absolutely will take feeder fish, but I'm not going to promote it because I want to have lazy fish, lazy predators that are happy to live in the presence of potential prey. And if you think about it, that's done all the time in public aquariums. RNJ11. We'll do a few more questions before we might look at wrapping it up, guys. Okay, here's a question that I have no experience with. So there you go. If anyone out there has experience with a Picasso triggerfish, now it's time to all that I would say, guys, if you've got any experience with that, just pop your thoughts into the chat. My experience with those style of triggerfish is only with my wedge tail, which is also a Rhinacanthus genus triggerfish. So I guess you could say it's kind of similar. And my experience with him is that it's always been in the presence of coral, and it's never been a problem. I thought about a week ago, last weekend, that it was starting to nip the tips of my green Dallas Acropora stag that I got growing, because it was just, the green Dallas was just going backwards. And of course I got the phosphate issue at the moment, so I didn't know what was going on, but it was just the tips that were always being broken. You see that little white chalk mark. And I thought, oh no, here we go. It's the triggerfish. He's turned. And then I went out there one night and there was some bloody big crabs and little crabs, all with those black nippers perched inside the Acropora doing their thing. So the triggerfish is still a-okay. Loves nori, loves seafood, loves pellets, eats anything, very active, always wants to sleep in a designated hole. We'll guard that hole from other fish, and we'll get other fish out of the hole if need be. But he's not aggressive, and no one bothers with him, because I just like even the clown tang, which is a real pain, doesn't bother with the triggerfish. So yeah, but if anyone's got any specific advice regarding the Picasso trigger, pop it down there. Ravencore, any more on the chiller project? Was thinking, put a barrel in your walking filled with water and then coils. Put a barrel in your walking filled with water and then coils of pipe feeding your tank. Water stays cold once it's temperature, so less work on the walking. Okay, what I think, mate, we're thinking along the same lines. What I'm thinking about doing, yes, is having a pump, probably a Eheim Universal, those bricks, because they're bulletproof, they've got good head pressure, they can push water through skinny tubing. Pipe the water to, maybe I'll start with a 30-meter coil of half-inch poly, which is inside the cool room. I'll insulate the lengths that go to and from the cool room so it doesn't lose the coolness. The universal Eheim will be on my Inkbird alongside my fan. So when it gets too hot, it can turn on and pump water into that coil, which is located in the cool room, which is set at 4 degrees to 6 degrees range, so 5 degrees Celsius. And I have thought about the idea of putting that coil into a crate or a barrel of fresh water with a lid that's sitting inside the cool room as well. I'm not sure if that's necessary. Something in my mind tells me that if it's immersed, if that coil is immersed in cold water, it's going to chill faster than if it was just sitting in the cool room by itself, maybe with a fan blowing over it. But that's yet to come. Right, Ravencore Chiller Project. Okay, Steve, good night, mate. Go and have dinner. That's great. David 020218 asks, I know that you can get ozone producing UVC bulbs. Would that be dangerous or overkill? So that's something which I've heard. I haven't experienced. But to be honest with you, ozone, if you're thinking about ozone for disease management or parasite control, like sanitation, for example, no. I don't believe that the dosage of ozone that we put into our tanks is strong enough or large enough to have that sanitizing effect. So obviously it's going to have a effect where it's going to create oxidization of organic substances in the water, make the water clear. That's the main thing, main reason we want to do it, take away smells, that kind of thing. But clarity is the main reason why. Would it be an issue having ozone alongside of UV? I don't think it would be. I intend to fully do that with my Palau reef because that much carbon can be expensive, and it's a 4 foot from front to back viewing distance, so you're going to see differences in clarity. But again, ozone needs to be run for a very short period of time from what I've read, and it's not something that needs to be run all the time. You can do it in conjunction with a ORP controller, or at least ORP meter, and generally should be done where it comes on when there's no people in the room. In my case, my shed, you do it at the wee hours of the morning, and you maybe even have some carbon on the vent from the skimmer, which is usually where you'll dose the ozone. So I don't believe it's overkill, but you need to use ozone in conjunction with UV carefully, not for the UV, but for the ozone. And I think we're up to scratch, guys. And that's 1 hour and 20 minutes, guys, and maybe girls. That's 1 hour and 20 minutes. So that's great. So unless anybody's got any more questions, we think we might be able to leave it at that. So don't forget that if you are watching this on YouTube after the fact, just because of the time zone, I think in America it's about either midnight or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, we might have a few Americans that see this on YouTube. And if you've got some questions that you want answered, then pop them into the comments section of the YouTube video, this one that you've watched, and I'll collate those, I'll grab them, and we'll answer them. Myself and the chat will answer them next Sunday at the very start of the stream in preparation for when the main chat starts to appear. Hey, so how's that sound? Fried duck, 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's dedication for you, mate. Love it. So thank you very much for everyone coming along, and it's great to see some familiar faces there. And so next live stream, I'm going to try and make this a weekly event as long as you guys are there for it. You got questions for it. No point sitting here looking at each other without any questions. But if you've got some conversation to have, let's converse. So I'll see you next week at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully going to be putting a video out on the pufferfish this week, and hopefully get my reef plunging device up and running. So there'll be hopefully a bit of content there to discuss as well. And we'll see you next Sunday on the Australian Aquarist live stream. Over now.
Ooh, over and out.